few things. One was a understanding human struggle. I think that as a young person, I didn't understand the difference between what we aspire to as people and human frailty. So I sort of got a message that we, do this, or we do that, or we aspire. Well, it was never the word aspire. We are compassionate. We are authentic. We are God conscious, and they were presented much more two dimensional.
This is Chocolate and Coffee Break, a compassionate proposition, a space to share stories, bridge divides, and spark meaningful connections. So grab your chocolate, pour your cuppa, and let's break down barriers, one conversation at a time. And now, here's your host, Andrea Putting.
And welcome to Chocolate and Coffee Break. So I hope you've brewed a coffee and you got your favorite chocolate and you're ready to share in another heartwarming story. So today I'm sharing my cuppa with Rabbi Zalman Kastel. He's a warm soul with a heart for connection, raised as a Jew in Brooklyn, I believe. And we're going to find out more about how he builds bridges across faith and culture through the work that he does and what sparked that. So I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with you, Zalman, and exploring some incredible things. So welcome, Zalman.
Lovely to be here with you, Andrea.
So Zalman, I'd like to start with a heart-opening question. And my question for you is, who taught you the most about compassion?
That's an interesting one. I want to say firstly that for me, before I get to compassion, one of the things that I learned, the most important lesson I learned in my life from my mother was that sense of duty, that sense of doing what's right, being focused on being of service. So a sort of a more general ethical mindset about life. Life isn't about being happy, it's about doing what's right. In terms of compassion, there's an Australian woman, an author, her name is Michelle Brenner, and she's written about compassion and has also introduced me to this idea of compassion as to suffer with, to just sit with, put yourself in someone else's shoes and try and really understand what they're going through. And more than that, also trying to alleviate some of that suffering when I can.
Mm. So I'm sure that's really opened up your eyes to, when you start studying compassion, it really is eye-opening to the different ways that we can explore it. So we can explore some of that today. So there was a moment in your life, you grew up Jewish, and how do you think that created the view in your life of how you see the world?
Being Jewish for me was an all-encompassing experience. It wasn't. I went to an all-Jewish school. I lived in a Jewish community in Brooklyn, New York, and the stories of persecution, of everything was Jewish. The whole world was Jewish in terms of my experiences, except for the baddies, enemies like Khmelnytsky, the sort of a figure, Bogdan Khmelnytsky, who was a figure that was very significant in Ukrainian history. And he was seen as one of the sort of baddies, or Pharaoh or Hitler, people like that. But otherwise, it was a bubble. It was an all-encompassing way of thinking about the world. Right and wrong was very much defined by my scriptures. good and bad was very much concerned, it's sort of defined by my community and what happens in my community. I grew up in New York in the 70s and the 80s. I had never heard of Martin Luther King Jr. and his "I Have a Dream" speech. I didn't understand. I lived in a mixed Black and Jewish neighborhood. But I was going to say mixed Black and Jewish community, but it wasn't at the time. It was two parallel communities, absolutely disconnected from each other, to such an extent that I remember after there were some horrible experiences. An Australian Jewish man was murdered by a Black man, part of a gang. There was racial tension that was underlying it, known as the Crown Heights riots in 1991. There was an effort to try and bring young Jewish and Black teenagers together to play basketball. And to me, it didn't cross my mind that I would ever consider playing, not just because I'm really bad at basketball, but because we were just so disconnected. There were very few people in my community that participated in that bridge building work. It was outside my imagination. It was beyond scope completely.
So what is it that changed that view in your life?
A few things. One was a understanding human struggle. I think that as a young person, I didn't understand the difference between what we aspire to as people and human frailty. So I sort of got a message that we do this, or we do that, or we aspire. Well, it was never the word aspire. We are compassionate. We are authentic. We are God conscious, and they were presented much more two dimensional, and a very significant moment in my life. Not the first, but maybe the second, was going to a Muslim school called Arcana. It's a Muslim school in Sydney, in a different part. Sydney is quite segregated in terms, well, not formally, but there are different ethnicities that are concentrated in different areas. So I live in a part of North Sydney where there are a lot of South African Jewish people, a lot of Chinese. There are parts of Sydney that have a lot of South Lebanese. There are parts of Sydney that are more North Lebanese, Indian, and so on. So the first time I traveled outside my bubble of the eastern suburbs and the north part of Sydney that I'm familiar with, to the south part where there's a large Lebanese Muslim community, I was afraid of how I'd be received there, and I thought it'd be something terrible, to such an extent that I disguised myself, and instead of wearing my normal black yarmulke, I put on a white one to sort of look more Muslim. And the disguise worked so well that we asked the children to guess which of us was Muslim. And me with the beard and the dark skin and the big white cap, the children guessed that I was the Muslim. We had a Muslim Christian and a Jew on a panel, and we did some fun things with the kids. But one of the first things we did was to ask which of us was Muslim. And I had managed, with my clever disguise, to be chosen as a Muslim member of the panel. But what I learned that day in 2002 from just talking to these children was that deep altruism that can be found in any culture, but emphasized, I think, in some cultures more explicitly than others. And the children talked about zakat and wanting to make the world a better place and please God and help others. And they're primary school kids, and in a context that brought out the best in them, with shining eyes, and they were just beautiful kids. And I think that moment really brought home to me the universality of the human experience. That not just we all like chocolate. but because I think there's that superficial idea that all of humanity's got so much in common. But I think at a much deeper level, we all want to be good. We all want to think well of ourselves. We want to be loved. We want to love others. We want to have meaning. These very, very deep, beautiful parts of being human are universal, I believe.
Yes, we all want to make a difference. So let's just slip off to a quick break so I can have a nibble of my chocolate, and we can subscribe while we're having a break, but also watch who's supporting this show.
When I hit perimenopause, all I heard was doom and decline until I took a sacred pause and I went searching for women who are radiant after menopause, like Dr. Christiane Northrup, Dr. Vandana Shiva, and the late Dr. Gladys McGarry, still shining at 103. In this book, and the magic that menopause truly holds, 7 Wonders of Menopause is a sacred reminder. You're not ending, you're returning. Available at independent bookshops in Australia and Amazon around the world.
Did you know that only 30% of speakers are women and that only 13% of panels feature women? In order to change that, there is now a directory at womenspeakers.com.au where you can go and search for a speaker. We also have groups on Facebook and LinkedIn under the name Australian Women Speakers, where you can just go and post about your event and women will respond.
Zalman, I'd really like to find out about Together with Humanity, the organisation that you started. And so can you tell me let's start with what's the inspiration to do that?
Together for Humanity is inspired by a few things. One is just that the importance of seeing each other accurately, seeing each other as we are, rather than the stereotypes. I think that there, certainly when we began in 2000, the first school that Together for Humanity reached was a school in St. Ives North Primary School. That was shortly after the terrorist attack on New York, September 11. And there was a sense that Muslims were the other. We then had the children overboard and demonization of refugees, and there's a lot of misunderstanding of Jewish people at the moment. So that's one part of it. Is a deep desire for people to be known as accurately, and for people to be aware of the ways in which we misunderstand each other, misread each other, stereotype, generalize, and the influences of social media and lazy discourse, a lack of curiosity. But that's another bit. I talk about this using this little prop, and I reflect on my oldest son, Aaron, when he was a baby, and he was this wide open spirit. He was my oldest son, and obviously, this miracle of life that had come into my world. He had bright, shining eyes. He was always, making contact with people, and sitting on an airplane, looking over the seat to the passenger behind, or there was this great openness, and a lot of children are like that at a young age. But what I've noticed in recent times is that as children grow, or as their bodies grow, often their spirits begin to shrink. And this guardedness that you see with teenagers, a sense of lack of playfulness, a kind of a sense of just being a little bit on edge. And I learned that from Terry O'Connell from the restorative justice movement. But helping young people belong, helping young people thrive, helping young people feel confident in themselves to be themselves, to be playful, to speak sincerely, authentically, rather than in a guarded way. And that requires, first of all, children to recognize that they have choices about how to respond to the struggles of life, because, we all struggle. There are always moments, this chasing of peak experience all the time, I guess, would be equivalent to eating chocolate all day. Chocolate is great because it's different, it's a treat. And I think I was reflecting on peak experiences, and they don't always happen. They're not part of day-to-day life. Day-to-day life is about courageous decisions that we make where it could go wrong, and sometimes it does. But to recognize that the knocks we get are temporary, and the people who are mean to us or misunderstand us or bully us or whatever it is, they're just part of a picture. And really, I think for young people to think about the ways in which they're snapping shut, and to say, do you want to be that like under a turtle shell and defensive, or do you want to be somebody who can participate and contribute?
So you go into schools and share this message with them.
Absolutely, and share the message, and hopefully also draw out from them their own wisdom, their own insights, their own aha moments. I mean, one experience that was very moving for me was with some students at a Catholic school, where students, were fairly happy a lot of the time. We asked them to draw a mask, and inside the mask, to split the mask in half, and have half of it is, how do you know yourself? And the other half is, how do other people see you? Sorry, no, I mixed it. I skipped a step. One half is, how do you see yourself? The other half is, how do you present yourself to others? And then outside the mask are the words that other people represent you. And the students at this particular middle class school mostly found a fair strong, a lot of alignment between the ways that other people perceive them, the way that they present themselves to others, and the way that they feel inside. Most of them felt that those three representations of themselves were quite aligned. And then I asked them to think about another community that was not far from their school, where there was a lot of low-income people, a lot of Aboriginal young people, a lot of crime. And I asked them, what would be the words that would be on the outside of that? If they were doing the exercise instead of you, what would be the words on the outside, the representations that those young people are dealing with, coping with? And they said, delinquent and criminal and problem, and all of these words. And then they thought about, okay, how do we, as people, with some privileges, how do we try and make a world in which people are represented fairly, honestly, accurately, and with a little bit tilting towards the positive, So, I mean, I don't think we want people to put their head in the sand and to pretend that everything is always perfect all the time. But it's nice to be seen in the best light. It's nice to be seen for our strengths rather than our shortcomings. So that was a powerful experience. And another variation of that one was actually with a child who was misrepresented. I was in Perth with a young woman. We did this activity together. She's from a Somali background. She's got cerebral palsy. Incredibly articulate woman, very, very successful, and very self-aware. And we did this exercise with young people, one of whom was suffering from a mental health condition she was always, I think it was borderline personality disorder. And she was always, getting into trouble with people, and she was labeled as problem and all of these negative, harsh words. And she said, people don't see me for who I am. I don't want to upset people. Yeah, sometimes I don't read the social cues, and I might say something that upsets somebody, but I actually am a good person. I want to contribute. I want to be helpful and kind and caring and compassionate. And this is the contrast between the way that she was portrayed and the way she understood herself and her own motivations was beautiful. And in the end, she also said, "Look, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this because I sometimes get it wrong, but I just want to say to this Somali, my fellow facilitator, Alia," and she said, "Alia, I just want to say, I want to congratulate you on your life. This is a woman. Alia had been bullied at school for her cerebral palsy, for her color of her skin, and the fact that she was Muslim and had a scarf, and the triple, othering and disrespect and treated off in an awful way. And here was this girl, from a white background with purple hair, who could just congratulate her. And there was this moment of connection, and I just felt so privileged to be in the presence of that exchange.
That's beautiful. And it just reminds us that what we see on the outside is might not be what's going on the inside. And we have to stop and listen, take a moment to listen. And while we're listening, we can stop as I have a quick sip and listen to our supporters and subscribe to the show.
Introducing 123 Read to Me. We give books to children who don't have books so they can succeed. Help us give away books to supported playgroups, kindergartens, schools, community events. Come and sort books. Donate money. $5 equals one book in the hand of a child. Because just one book a day creates clever, kind and confident kids. 123 Read to Me.
You've ticked the boxes: career, commitments, calendar that's more packed than your pantry, but something's still missing. In Compassionate Purpose, Andrea Putting invites you to stop chasing busy and start living with intention. This book is about real fulfillment through small acts of compassion, purpose-driven service, and meaning that last. No pressure, no perfection, just purpose with heart. Compassionate Purpose, Discovering a Life of Fulfillment. Search for Andrea Putting on Amazon.
Your work, Zalman, is just so important at this time because we're experiencing a lot of division in community and we want to help that heal. So what can we do as everyday citizens to help that work? And I know that the Jewish people in particular are having an extremely hard time. I had a conversation with a Jewish lady yesterday about what she's going through. So how can we help?
Yeah, we were talking to a school in Victoria this week, and they talked about this idea of passion with compassion. I think that seeing people who we interact with as complex beings with multiple aspects to them, not reducing people to a stereotype or a political position or an assumed political position. Each of us is much more than one thought that we have in our mind. And so I think reaching out, having conversations, and sitting sometimes with discomfort, I think one of the things that's happened in the last 2 years is that because of what's happening overseas in Gaza and what's happened in Israel, there's been a heightened sensitivity, and people sometimes either fall into a sort of a binary where I'm picking a side. Either I'm with, have compassion for the Palestinians, or I support Israel, and therefore, you've got to choose a side. And if one chooses a side, then it closes doors to people who might not have chosen in the same way that someone chooses, whichever way they choose. There's been a lot of. I was listening to a Palestinian woman this week who talked about a very close friendship she had with a Jewish woman, and it just ended in the last 2 years. And they had a lot in common. That their children had sort of shared experiences, and they connected as mothers for so many years. And because of the heightened concern and grief, pain, fear, anger, there's a closing of a door, and I think it's unfortunate, unnecessary. It doesn't help anyone. I think we can be engaged citizens and to care, and to think about the ways in which we show caring in so that it advances justice and compassion and healing and health and well-being and prosperity and dignity. I think that sometimes people, in the name of compassion, just do very lazy, angry, purposeless gestures that make them feel good about themselves. I love that term, slacktivism, where I can just put a post on social media and pat myself on the back, and I'm done. I now go back to other things, eating chocolate or making money, doing my to-do list, petty office politics, whatever it is that sorting my socks. I think we need to be a little bit more purpose-oriented, and I think when we are purpose-oriented, then we don't fall into. Look, I want to be very clear. There will be relationships that will fall apart, and I think part of that also comes down to consent. People will launch into political conversations with other people without asking them if they are okay to have that conversation. And I think there's a great place in making a difference in deliberative kind of conversations. What can we do to make the world a better place? What should happen here? What should happen there? What should Trump do? What should Albanese do, or Putin, or and those conversations, I guess, serve some purpose. I'm not sure that a very productive one, but often we have conversations with people who are not ready to have those conversations.
Yeah.
And dive in. I mean, a crude example of that was me walking in a shopping center, and somebody walks over to me, not even approach me, not hello, not good afternoon, not can we have a conversation, and just mumbles one word at me, the word genocide, and away they go. And it's, I am, just because I am visibly Jewish, I am assumed to be part of a conflict half a world away. I am assumed to be a fair target. I think we need to be curious about each other's lived experiences. How are you doing? I see you. I hear you. Just listen to each other. And listening doesn't mean necessarily agreement. So I think to be able to listen to people's experiences, listen to what they're going through, how they're feeling, without feeling the need to correct them about the world. No, that's not true. You're not the victim. Someone else is the victim, because there can only be one victim. The world must be divided into the goodies and the baddies. The colonialist sort of white evil rich perpetrator, and the brown-skinned, victim, as if all, people with certain skin colors or certain sizes of houses or bank accounts or histories or ethnicities are somehow one category. There's something I read many years ago, beautiful book, The Color of Water, where a black man is being pressured to think that all white people have it easy, and he knew it wasn't true. Let's see each other as we are, to learn and be curious.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me today, Rabbi Zalman Kastel. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And please share your chocolate and coffee, because chocolate's always better shared with someone maybe of a different religion. And always let love be the loudest voice.